Good afternoon, Dudley Street families and community. It's me, Mr. Hextall. I'm just sharing a video update with you all this week. This update will be in English and in Spanish, and I want to introduce Ms. Torres, who will be translating for us in Spanish.
Buenas tardes, mi nombre es el principal, Mr. Hector, y vamos a ponernos todos juntos para hacer un video para la enseñanza que viene.
Excellent. So we decided to do a video update to explain all that is happening with our planning from remote to hybrid transition. Before I begin that, I do want to make sure I say thank you to all of our families for all of your efforts so far this year. I know there's been a lot of challenges in a variety of ways, and we've seen a lot of successes despite all of that, and could not have done that without you all. And so for this session and update, I'll begin by sharing our goals for the transition, share kind of our process for planning, and then some data from our school community that's informed our current thinking.
Hemos decidido presentarle lo que está pasando con los planes de la enseñanza remota y la transición a híbrido usando un video. Antes de comenzar, quiero darle las gracias a todas las familias y por todos los esfuerzos y apoyo. Actualmente tenemos visto muchos de los éxitos a pesar de los muchos retos de la enseñanza remota. Voy a empezar compartiendo nuestras metas para la transición y el proceso del plan, de la planificación y la data de parte de nuestra comunidad es hasta que ha informado nuestros pensamientos actualmente para proceder.
So our goals, as we share this update with the school community, are make sure that we have a safe reopen for every constituent. So whether that's myself, whether that's staff and teachers, or the students and families that will be returning to the building. And we also want to ensure that everyone understands what we've been thinking about in terms of what instruction actually looks like when we do transition back to in-person learning.
So, estas son las metas de lo que estamos pensando actualmente en nuestras escuelas. Queremos una prudente abertura para todos nuestros constituyentes de nuestra comunidad, estudiantes y personal. También queremos asegurarnos que todos entiendan cómo la enseñanza se puede ver a lo largo del tiempo. Es cualquier modelo en particular. Así podemos tener la mejor experiencia con cualquier enseñanza para nuestros estudiantes, sus hijos o hijas.
I'm going to talk about our original timeline and our process thus far. So first, we wanted to do a family and staff needs assessment. We reached out to families to identify their preferences for remote or hybrid learning. Many of the families in our community filled out the district survey from Boston Public Schools at the beginning of the school year, which helped out a lot in terms of our outreach. Others who didn't have the opportunity to do that, we made sure we called over the last couple of weeks to gain insight on their preferences. With that information, we began compiling different cohorts for potential A and B groups, similar to the hopscotch model that you see the district adopting. And then we began to think about what our potential safety protocols would be and the procedures within the school, as well as getting all of the materials to set up the school in order to be ready for students at this time. Finally, after reaching out to the families and talking to you all, we actually made sure that I met with all of the teaching staff to understand what their particular needs and concerns were around health and safety for themselves and their families. And we then started to think about what the timeline would be. And so originally we wanted to have students start to phase back in on November 2nd, as long as everything felt safe in order to do so.
Este es el approach de nuestra escuela. Nosotros hemos podido identificar las preferencias de nuestra familia. Muchas de nuestras familias han llenado una encuesta que el distrito escolar mandó al principio del año. Para comenzar, otras familias que no tuvieron la oportunidad de hacer la encuesta, nosotros hemos llamado para poder tener una idea de qué son sus preferencias para continuar con las enseñanzas de su hijo o hija. Con esa información comenzamos a compilar diferentes grupos para agrupar a los estudiantes en dos grupos, grupo A y grupo B, el modelo que el distrito escolar escogió. También hemos estado trabajando en el protocolo de seguridad y procedimiento para cómo podemos enseñar la enseñanza en persona. Finalmente nos hemos reunido con nuestros maestros para discutir sus preocupaciones y también sus necesidades de salud. Nuestra meta original era de lanzar la fase del plan del 2 de noviembre que se sentía seguro para todos estudiantes y nuestras personas.
So I want to share with the Dudley Street community the data and information that we did collect during that process. First of all, let's think about our families. Around 35% of our families have currently opted into the hybrid learning model, and so wanting students to return to in-person part of the school week. A little over 50% of our families have actually opted for remote learning throughout the time, and so staying home completely. And about 15%, the remainder of our families were still undecided around or going back and forth between what their decision would be. From a staff perspective, all of our staff remain committed and want to return to students. A number of them did elevate concerns to me around their own high-risk situations, whether that be them being in a high vulnerable category themselves or living with a family member who was more prone and susceptible to negative impacts of COVID. Additionally, we had the luxury of being a school that was completely remote and did not transition at all. And so I've had an opportunity to look at what's happening both in the city and at different schools. The Boston COVID rates just went up over the last couple of weeks, and then they're now over 4%, which has caused the Boston Public Schools reopening for phase 3 to actually be delayed minimally at least a week. And they are currently evaluating and updating week by week. Additionally, if you look at data for Roxbury and Dorchester, which is where most of our families and students are from, those rates have actually gone up even more, well over 5% in each throughout for the different families that we serve. We've also had the chance, as I mentioned, to actually see some of the schools and think about what's happening with their high in-person priority students, many of which who have opted opted not to return to school, even though they had the opportunity to.
Basada en la información que se recogió de los miembros de nuestra escuela Dudley Street Neighborhood Community School, aquí están las datas que tenemos hasta ahora. La preferencia de nuestra familia es 35% híbrido, 50% quieren esto remoto y 15% no han decidido lo que quieren. Nuestro personal que quieren retornar a servir a nuestros estudiantes, pero hay personas con directo contacto al riesgo, con muchas familiares vulnerables y están de alto riesgo ellos mismos. Hemos tenido la oportunidad de mirar las escuelas de Boston, abrir los colegios y seguir las instrucciones del Departamento de Salud Pública. Los números del COVID-19 han subido en las comunidades que la mayoría de nuestras familias residen, Dorchester y Roxbury. La velocidad es significante en la ciudad. Ha subido 4% y ha causado el distrito a retrasar en la otra fase de la apertura. Hemos tenido el chance y la oportunidad de ver los estudiantes que están asistiendo y muchos de ellos han escogido no regresar en persona por lo que está pasando en la ciudad.
And so the most important part of our process the last few weeks was exploring what instruction actually looks like and across these different models. And there's a few things we've seen in action, both across the district, across the state, and what we were considering. So the first is if we move into hybrid, thinking about what we could say is hybrid English teaching, where teachers actually have students who are live in the classroom that they are teaching, but they are also responsible for monitoring students who are online. we saw that that was pretty difficult as a teacher in order to be able to do both of those things at once. And so that quickly became something that we weren't very interested in. The other idea was around this hybrid asynchronous model, which would mean that students who are remote are doing mostly asynchronous work, while the teachers who are in the building are actually teaching with, are working directly with those students. And then the students who are remote are getting asynchronous check-ins throughout the day, both from that teacher and from our other staff members. Where we saw gaps here is that we do have a majority of our students who are going to be remote the whole time, and that could be a significant loss of instructional time, direct instructional time, that we don't want to actually happen. And finally, where we're leaning is thinking about remote, what we're calling remote plus, which is where students are all learning online. Hybrid students are in person in the building, but because they are in the building and because the day is a little bit longer, they have opportunities for enrichment, both during the day as well as at the end of the day, while still being able to complete online assignments following along with the teacher who can help support them while they are in person.
El proceso más importante de nosotros en estas pocas semanas fue de explorar qué enseñanza actualmente se ve la más importante. Hemos visto varias cosas en acciones que fueron consideradas en nuestras escuelas, simultáneamente híbrido. Y esto quiere decir la enseñanza de los estudiantes en persona y en la casa. Esto presenta un reto para nuestras maestras y maestros en términos de tratar de enseñar a dos grupos, uno en la casa y otro remoto. Estas son cosas bien diferentes de hacer. El próximo es la enseñanza asincronada. Aquí se quiere decir que el estudiante recibe enseñanza en persona y los otros que estén remotos. La maestra los chequea con ellos una vez al día. Este asincronamiento es más independiente para los niños que están remotos. Y el que estamos tratando de ver, que creo que es el mejor, es el remoto más. Es un nuevo término. Este se ve el mejor modelo. Los estudiantes continúan remoto, pero algunos de los estudiantes pueden que están en la escuela, la estructura para ellos es mejor porque todos pueden seguir el mejor camino de aprendizaje sin trastorno. Los maestros están ahí para enseñarles y tienen más oportunidades de tener la enseñanza que necesitan.
So what does that mean given our process, our data, and what we're seeing right now for our decision making? We too have decided that we are going to delay our hybrid reopening and our phase-in. We will not phase in person learning on November 2nd. Minimally, we are going to do is push back our grade level phase-ins 3 weeks to no earlier than November 30th. In that interim time, we are going to identify our schedule and then also explore getting our highest need students in order to make sure that we can support some students earlier than that. And we'll continue to look at the COVID data closely in the next 2 weeks to inform our date of return and any fluctuations for that. And so we will be paying close attention to the data, ensuring that the city feels safe, monitoring what is happening with other schools, and making sure that our model is the best model possible as we decide to return. And then upon phasing in, we will lean towards starting with a remote plus model, as we just mentioned, to continue consistency in instruction and support our students and staff for this transition.
So, ¿cómo tiene que ver nuestra decisión? Nuestra decisión fue basada en que no podemos empezar la fase en persona que decidimos para noviembre 2. Vamos a mirar los resultados de la data del COVID-19 dentro de 2 semanas para informar nuestra decisión que sería mejor para toda la familia y nuestros estudiantes. Lo más seguro es que la data, estamos pendientes a toda la data que va a ser el noviembre 30 y vamos a explorar cómo podemos, cuáles son los estudiantes que tienen que necesitan estar en la escuela porque tienen la mayoría de los estudiantes que tienen educación especial, cuáles necesitan estar en la escuela lo más pronto posible. ¿Y qué quiere, dónde estamos ahora? Pueden esperar que yo como principal actualmente le voy a dar y los voy a mantener todos informados cada 2 semanas de todo lo que está pasando. Va a empezar en octubre 23. Vamos a poder ayudar y continuar ayudar y continuar con todo lo que estamos haciendo, ayudar a nuestros maestros, ayudar a nuestra comunidad y a todo el mundo. Y también queremos darle las gracias por todo el apoyo que todo el mundo ha dado para continuar, que todos los estudiantes de nosotros estén seguros y que podamos seguir y poder tener una transición saludable para que todo se mantenga saludable y bien.
So I want to say thank you to all our families continuing to support our scholars, and we will continue to do the same. You can expect an update from me in 2 weeks on October 23rd with a more solidified plan and updates around our planning. Thank you. Have a wonderful, safe, long weekend.
Dice otra vez que pueden, él va a mandarle una actualización de lo que está pasando y pueden mirar que para octubre 23 va a ser la primera actualización que él va a tener y ustedes van a saber lo que está pasando. Quiere darle las gracias a todos otra vez por ser y esperar con paciencia con todo lo que está pasando, pero siempre queremos lo mejor para los estudiantes. So, gracias y cualquier cosa que necesiten saber, me pueden llamar. Yo le voy a decir a él que le dé mi número y mi nombre. Me pueden llamar a mí cualquier pregunta que tengan. Elijah, I also told them if they